given what we have seen in the Department of Justice under the second Trump administration, and given your history as a state prosecutor, federal prosecutor, working under Republican and Democratic administrations, and your work at the ICC, what's your diagnosis of what is happening to the department? And similar to the question I had about what happens when the next president comes in and this sort of tit for tat concern, are we also at the Department of Justice leading to a spiral where, let's assume we have a Democratic administration at some point, and what do they do then? Do they try and clean house? I mean, does it become a tit for tat where we essentially no longer have a civil service in the federal government, which is supposed to sort of eradicate this issue of we only hire Democrats, we only hire Republicans? So how do you sort of see where we are and the prospect of what's going to happen?
You're right about the compound questions, by the way. That's definitely
yeah.
Let me break that down and take it in, I think, reverse order. Yes, I think the attacks on public servants, particularly nonpartisan public servants, I think it has a cost for our country that is incalculable, and I think that it's hard to communicate to folks how much that is going to cost us. If you think getting rid of the people who know most about national security is going to make our country safer, you do not know anything about national security. And that's happening throughout the department. It makes me concerned. And, this idea that if you didn't vote for the current person in office, you can't be trusted to be a government employee. In the United States, we tried that. It's called a patronage system, where you got the job because of who you supported, not because you knew how to do the job, the competence part. And we know that it's rife with corruption and it's rife with incompetence. And so that makes me very concerned going forward. But in terms of what I see now, and it goes back to the analysis that I gave you before, if you are driven to achieve certain outcomes, no matter what, that's a real problem. That's not something I saw in the Department of Justice, and I think it bears mentioning. I worked in the department for years, Republican, Democrat, Republican. I was the acting U.S. attorney in the first Trump administration in Tennessee. Nothing like what we see now has ever gone on. This case in New York City, where the case against the mayor was dismissed in the hopes that he would support the president's political agenda. I mean, just so you know, nothing like it has ever happened that I've ever heard of. Recently, we had this issue of I guess it was people in the Defense Department using Signal to communicate with each other about war plans. Clearly classified information. I can tell you, Andrew will tell you, there is no administration, Republican or Democrat, that does not open an investigation in that situation. Nothing. Where the lives of servicemen are put at risk, zero. Never happens. So again, when we get to a place where the outcome is what matters and not the process, and the last one I'll just throw out is this latest prosecution of the former director of the FBI. There's a process to secure an indictment. There's a process of predication, having some evidence before you do that. And again, I only know what I see myself in the media, but the career prosecutors, the apolitical prosecutors who analyzed this said there wasn't a case, and so they brought somebody in who had never been a criminal prosecutor on days' notice to secure an indictment a day before the statute of limitations ended. That just reeks of lack of process.
I'll add to that the Trump-selected U.S. attorney resigned over this. So not just the career people, but also an actual presidential selection resigned. And if you listen to the president, was fired, but in another way was pressured out to not bring the case.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear too. I don't see, and I think a lot of Americans do not see this as a political issue. Process shouldn't be a political issue, right? Like if there's rules in the department about how to bring a case, follow those rules. You can't say, I want this outcome, let me throw the rules out. That's why, frankly, you see all these conflicts between the career apolitical prosecutors I worked with, because they're being asked to do things that they think are wrong, and because they're not political people, they're not going to do them. And I think that explains why you've seen the resignations, you've seen people leave the department. It's not because they're enemies of one administration or the next. They've worked through decades for different administrations. It's just they've been doing things apolitically forever, and when they're told, no, you got to get this outcome no matter what, that is so contrary to how we were all raised as prosecutors. I think that's been the center of all the conflict.